Hi everyone, and welcome to the Fake Love and Flying Monkeys podcast. My name's Nova Gibson and I am your host. My area of expertise is in supporting victims and survivors of narcissistic abuse and other toxic relationships. I'm the principal counsellor at Brighter Outlook Narcissistic Abuse Counselling Service, and I'm also the author of Fake Love, Understanding and Healing from Narcissistic Abuse. In this podcast, we're going to be talking about everything from the initial pink cloud you find yourself on at the start through to the horrific discard and the powerful trauma bond that keeps you hooked. So take your imaginary seat on the roller coaster that is narcissistic abuse, and don't forget to subscribe to this podcast so you never miss an episode of Fake Love and Flying Monkeys. Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of Fake Love and Flying Monkeys. How many of you out there listening to this episode were terrorized by the narcissist in your life as they drove recklessly? Perhaps they would do twice the speed limit, tailgating someone, or maybe slamming on the brakes just before they got to behind the car in front of them. Or maybe they would slam on the brakes in the middle of nowhere just to give you a mouthful and tell you off. Guys, this is such a frightening thing to happen to you. And as all abusive strategies are when they are engaged by your abuser, by the narcissist in your life, they are about power and control. Think about how isolated you are, how confined you are, how much you are at their mercy when you are in that tiny little confined space in the passenger seat. Maybe your kids are in the back and the narcissist is angry and they're using their anger by driving like a lunatic to intimidate you, to frighten you. You're begging them to stop. You're begging them to slow down. And what happens? You give in. Whatever they're trying to get out of you, whatever discussion perhaps you were trying to have with them, that goes out the window, because the relief you experience when they finally, in inverted commas, calm down or get their way, that relief outweighs any need for accountability. And of course, that kind of terror, I mean, you could lose your life. That kind of terror conditions you not to try and make them accountable ever again because of the fear they instilled in you when they were driving like an absolute maniac. Now, victims who have been conditioned over time to believe that they're not really being abused, if they've ever broached the subject of feeling like they're being treated poorly by their abuser, they're still under the impression much of the time that bruises and broken bones, that's an indication of abuse. And the covert type strategies that particularly a covert narcissist uses, such as the silent treatment, stonewalling, ghosting, gaslighting, sabotaging, smear campaigns, all those sorts of behaviours, or even behaviours that are intimidating and scary, frightening for you, where they might throw something that kind of just whizzes by your ear, doesn't hit you, because of course they'll say, I never had any intention of hitting you, but just as scary for the victim. Or maybe they'll punch a hole in the wall, or they will break a piece of furniture. Even those strategies are considered not abusive when they've been told over and over again by their abuser, the actual perpetrator, that they're not doing anything wrong, and this happens to all couples, and they've never hit you, so you can't say that you're the victim of abuse. So you've managed to not normalize, although that does happen, but minimize the impact of these types of intimidating and terrifying behaviors because they never hit you. And society looks for, unfortunately, bruises and busted noses and black eyes. Those visible types of injuries are unfortunately the ones that will get attention. I know I hear so often from my beautiful clients in my counseling practice, they say that, Nova, I feel like more of a victim if I did have, broken bones and busted ribs, because maybe then people would believe me, or maybe I could, make my partner or whoever it is in their life that's terrorizing them, I could make them see that, look at what you've done. You are abusing me. And of course, maybe I'd get more support from people in society. Maybe I could walk into that police station and I'd really, really be confident that I would be supported as a victim of abuse, even though I don't have any physical injuries on the outside to show for it. So when victims are conditioned to minimize those types of terrifying behaviors because they didn't hit them, then driving with someone who's driving like a maniac becomes just one more thing. It's not resulting in injuries for them, although it very well could be. And of course, they're conditioned to believe that somehow they deserved their abuser's anger. And if they could just stop doing whatever it was they were doing that was making their abuser so angry, then maybe they wouldn't be, driving so crazily. These types of coping mechanisms, survival techniques are imperative for the victim to come up with to survive the abuse. And when it comes to driving in the car or sitting in the car as a passenger most of the time, they tend to think that they're the only one, that no one else is experiencing this, or if they are, it's pretty normal. Their loved one, the husband or wife, they were angry. They just happened to get angry while they were behind the wheel of a car. I don't think there's any way that I can seriously categorize these intimidating, threatening types of behavior, which once again are all about power. I don't think I can say, well, that's worse than the other, but I don't know, when it comes to the terror that the narcissist instills in the victim and just their survival instincts that the victim experiences, and those instincts that kick in to stop the abuser from continuing that crazy behavior, no matter what they have to do, whether they have to own the abuse themselves or just say they were sorry when they hadn't done anything. The victim is just so at the mercy of the narcissist, who really is in charge of a lethal weapon, and very well could result in not just the loss of lives of their children in the car perhaps, or their victim who is sitting beside them, but other people on the road. I've spoken to so many of my clients who were in the car when their abuser was just flying down the highway doing 200 kilometers an hour, and just the fear they experienced. It was a terrifying experience for them, but it made them do whatever the narcissist wanted them to do, just to get them to stop. Now, it's not just the narcissist all the time who's driving like an absolute crazy person without any concern for the safety of their supposed loved ones. It's also happening when the victim is driving. Maybe the narcissist in your life has an alcohol problem. They have a drinking problem, and maybe they've lost their license and you're the one who has to drive them around all the time, or maybe you're just the allocated driver so they can drink all the time. Whatever the reason, if you're their chauffeur, that can be a really terrifying experience for the victim when the narcissist is criticizing your driving all the time, telling you that you're hopeless, or maybe giving you instructions as you're driving and saying, turn here and turn left, and giving you little or no time to prepare, and then abusing you because you took the wrong turn. It can be a really scary experience for the victim when they're the actual driver and their abuser is beside them. Not just abusing them in terms of how they're driving and what they've done wrong, but also interfering with the driving, maybe grabbing the steering wheel or ripping the handbrake up, or even hitting them while they're driving. And of course, screaming at you while you're driving is clearly going to affect your concentration. And if you're screaming back and you're having this argument in the car, you're being forced to react. That once again can be just as scary for the victim. The reason I'm bringing up all of these scenarios, guys, is because I want you to not feel alone, and I want you to realize, as I always do, that this is a textbook behavior that many abusers engage in to bring their victim under control, and to be able to say to them, I never hit you. And whilst they're engaging in other distracting behaviors, such as a very common one, which is to appear to be the martyr when it comes to other people abusing their loved ones. They'll plaster stuff all over social media about how they can't stand anyone who, hits their partner or abuses their partner. And maybe they'll jump in the middle of an argument in the middle of a bar, to defend the fair mademoiselle, the fair damsel in distress, I should say. They do these things to distract from the fact that they're actually an abuser themselves. So these behaviors are so confusing for the victim because they're suffering at home, but everyone else thinks that they are just this hero who stands up for the little person who can't defend themselves. Another way that the narcissist brings fear and terror to the victim, who virtually has a panic attack every time they have to get in the car with their abuser. The car becomes a source of trauma. It becomes a trigger for the victim. But another way the abuser scares their victim is when they threaten, or they do drop their loved one off and then leave them there and tell them to find their own way home, because that's your punishment for daring to criticize me. And it's so scary, frightening for the victim. They love to do this when you're overseas and you don't know where you are. Even knowing that maybe you've left your phone in the car or your bag and you've got no way of contacting anyone. This is about power. It's about dominating you. And once again, the victim, when the narcissist comes back to get you like they're your hero, the victim experiences such relief that they've been rescued by the very person who put them in that dangerous position to begin with. But that relief is palpable for the victim, and they daren't bring up the reason that perhaps they were trying to have a discussion with the narcissist in the first place. It's just such a relief that that is over and they can just get on with their life and they don't want to talk about it again. And once again, the abuser is conditioning you through this fear to not make them accountable. And at the same time, they're also making the car, they're weaponizing the car, which makes the car a source of trauma for the victim. Now, guys, if this is happening to you, or if you would just like to talk about what you're going through, I am a professional counselor and I counsel people all over the world via Zoom. So please just see my website link in the description, and I would love to be able to support you one-on-one no matter where you are. But getting back to the car becoming a source of trauma for the victim, I spoke a lot about this in my book, Fake Love, Understanding and Healing from Narcissistic Abuse, about the fact that when victims are in these abusive situations, or even after they've been discarded or they've managed to escape and they've got, complex post-traumatic stress disorder, anxiety, and all of these other things as a result of that ongoing trauma, when they were in a constant state of hypervigilance, I talk about the fear of driving that victims have. And it is so common, but every client I speak to thinks that they're the only one. Now, I would love to hear from you guys in the comments on the podcast or on my social media pages. If this happened to you, in that you were not able to drive like you used to after you had experienced this type of abuse. And the consensus is, or consistent stories I am hearing, or scenarios that I'm hearing that victims have experienced and are experiencing, is that they're driving and they have a panic attack. And anyone who's had a panic attack will know how utterly terrifying it is. It feels like you're going to die. It feels like you can't breathe and your heart starts beating faster. Your hands become sweaty. You start to hyperventilate. You feel like you're going to be sick or you're going to pass out. So you have this panic attack whilst you're driving. And after that, you pull over when you have that first panic attack. And after that, it becomes the fear of having another panic attack because it was such a terrifying experience. So what inevitably happens in these situations is that not only do victims suffer so much loss in the form of, well, themselves, they lose who they are. And of course, they lose possessions, resources, time, assets. There's just so much loss. But many of them, when this happens and they just are too scared to drive anymore, they lose their freedom. We take it for granted just how much freedom being able to drive gives us. I ask my clients to tell me, when we're talking about their experience, their trauma, I ask them to tell me how much, when they were comfortable driving, how much do they actually remember when they're perhaps leaving for work in the morning. They've got a radio on, maybe they're listening to a podcast like Fake Love and Flying Monkeys, or they're just thinking about what they're going to have to do at work that day. Do you actually remember the trip? Well, strangely, or not strangely, most people say, well, no. And that's because you kind of get into this hypnotic kind of state when you're driving, because it just becomes so natural for you. You just go on autopilot, and you can listen to this and talk on hands-free and think about your day at work and get to work and not remember any lights you stopped at, or really not have any really clear memory of how you got from A to B, because you were in that trance-like kind of state, and where it was just such a natural thing for you to do. So when that freedom is taken away from you and you're feeling crazy because, why can't I drive? I've driven my whole life. Why am I scared to get behind the wheel of a car now? What is wrong with me? Maybe my abuser was right. All of these conditioned responses, these conditioned thought patterns kick in. And then, of course, it exacerbates the fear in driving, and it compounds the fear of having another panic attack. Now, if you're behind the wheel of a car when you're with the abuser and you have a panic attack, then they have even more power over you, and they will belittle you because you can't drive, or they have to drive you everywhere and pick you up. Meanwhile, this trauma in your life, the loss of freedom, having to be subjected to that belittling, is the direct result of their abuse. It's not the cause of them getting angry at you, it's the result of it. But if you're still in that relationship, then that makes it harder to leave. It lessens your self-worth and your self-esteem, and it puts you, further into their arms. It gives your abuser more control over you. But if you have managed to escape, or when you're discarded and you can't drive and you've got all of this other loss in your life and you can't explain why you have this overwhelming fear when you're driving, that can just compound those conditioned thoughts in your head, which is, there's something wrong with me. Now, there are commonalities between victims' stories with regard to their fear of driving in terms of the places that give them the most fear. And what they have told me, and this is what I write about in my book, Fake Love, is that the places that give them the most fear and put them off driving the most is the fear of driving on a highway, the fear of going into a tunnel, driving over train tracks, basically anywhere where they haven't got an immediate exit and they feel confined. And you won't find too much research on this particular commonality in victims' fear of driving as a result of their trauma. So my theory is this. Think of the trauma that you have suffered from your abuser, and the car was a trauma trigger. The car was paired together with the abuse. So the car becomes the conditioned, the conditioned stimuli that produces the conditioned response. Now I'm really getting into behavioral therapy here. The conditioned response becomes your absolute terror because the car has been paired together with abuse and fear. So you think about the control you had in this relationship, little or none. You had no control over your life. You were powerless. Your abuser had all the control. They controlled everything. They controlled your thoughts. They controlled your perceptions. And here you are in the car, you're driving, and now you are in control. You've got all of this power and you are in charge of a lethal weapon. You could hurt someone if you don't do the right thing, or if you're not thinking clearly. You could hurt yourself, and you experience fear because you've got all this control. You're used to your abuser screaming at you or telling you that you're useless, and you've got this control and you don't know what to do with it. So your brain becomes overloaded and you experience that panic attack, which essentially is telling you to stop doing this behavior. Stop. It's producing all of these horrible chemicals and all of these horrible physical, biochemical responses. And you need to stop then and there because car equals danger. So that is my theory. You have not been in control of your life for such a long time. You've been told that you can't think for yourself. Everything you do and say is wrong. And you have been totally disempowered. And here you are. And you're on the highway. You know, what if I have another panic attack? Or before the first panic attack and you're starting to feel, uncomfortable and there's no exit. You can't get off driving through that tunnel. What if you black out and you can't escape? Those types of confining situations are the ones that produce the most fear in the victims, and it makes perfect sense. So, guys, if this has happened to you, I would really love to hear your thoughts in the comments on the podcast, just to, let other people know that this happened to you, so you're not alone, to put it out there to the world that this is or can be a normal thing or trauma response, a trigger that victims have to deal with. But there is help out there. If this is happening to you, please be aware that this is most likely the result of your trauma, and a good, perhaps cognitive behavioral therapist will be able to support you, not just cognitive behavioral, but a therapist you trust who understands phobias and panic attacks and those types of normal but irrational fears. They will help you to break those conditioned responses so that driving no longer becomes something that is scary for you. But yeah, you've got to get the right support, but you've also got to understand that there is nothing wrong with you. You are not crazy. You are a traumatized victim who needs lots and lots of support to heal. So yes, just in summarizing, guys, the car is a weapon. The narcissist weaponizes the car. They weaponize driving, and it makes perfect sense that this would be a trigger for you that may rear its head further down the track. So if you are having these triggers when you're driving, or maybe it's when you're a passenger in a car. Maybe it's that you can't drive outside of your little safety zone. You can drive up the shops and back. You can drop the kids at school, but get you in an area that you're unfamiliar, and the fear of having another panic attack stops you from ever kind of going down that track. Once again, think about all the time your abuser yelled at you because you took a wrong turn, or you were driving too slowly, or you were driving too fast, or maybe you were not using the clutch properly, which was destroying their car, yada, yada, yada. All of those horrible things they said to you or screamed at you. More likely, think about that when you were in an area that wasn't familiar to you, and draw those conclusions, or start to connect the dots between what produces the most fear in you and your trauma that was inflicted on you by your abuser. And that brings us to the end of another Fake Love and Flying Monkeys episode. Yes, it is such a common weapon that narcissists use: driving, weaponizing the car, speeding, driving erratically, just using the car as a form of terror. It's a form of power, and it's used to exert their dominance over you. So guys, please don't feel alone. And if you'd like to have a one-on-one session with me worldwide, I talk to people through Zoom. I'd love to be able to talk to you if this is what you're experiencing, or any other issues. Just see my website in the link. Of course, don't forget to get your copy of my best-selling book, Fake Love, Understanding and Healing from Narcissistic Abuse, in which I talk about this very subject as it relates to narcissistic abuse. If you'd like to support this channel, guys, please share, tag your friends, leave a rating and review. That's what helps it out in the algorithm. And yeah, if you would like, I love coffee. There's a link there where you can buy me a cup of coffee. On that note, guys, it's bye from me for now. Until tomorrow's episode, remember, you are worthy of love, and you are worthy of so much more than a lifetime of fake love and flying monkeys.